if we, as a tiny little company born in a back office in Boulder, Colorado, right? If we had done the typical pathway, which was, I'm going to hire a bunch of sales guys, we're going to build this product, we're going to get some pipeline, and we're going to try and sell a foundational directory to big companies, it would have been a fool's errand. It would have been like, wait, what? Who are you guys? And you're asking me to swap out our most critical piece of infrastructure, the directory, and take a shot on you. That probably wouldn't have gone over very well.
Welcome to a new episode of All Aboard, the show where we have real conversations with IT and security practitioners. No fluff, no talking points, just straight talk from experts and advice for tackling the toughest problems facing cloud-forward companies today. I'm your host, Alex Bovee, CEO and co-founder of Conductor One. This week, I'm joined by Greg Keller, co-founder and CTO of JumpCloud. Greg gives us the inside view on how JumpCloud scaled into the market-leading platform it is today by leveraging a unique go-to-market strategy and staying true to their vision. Greg and I talk about why getting 1% better every day is a core value at JumpCloud and the importance of building a culture of mutual trust, respect, and open communication. We also cover the identity space and how it's evolved, the difference between consumer and workforce identity, and the blurring of lines between IT and security teams that his company and his customers see directly. Finally, we discuss the impact he expects AI will have on the identity world. Let's jump right in. Well, Greg, thank you for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. I was excited to be able to rope you in and worked hard at that one. Landing the CTO of a great identity and access management company is no easy feat. So thank you for being on the show today. And I think the guests are really going to love it. You've been founder, it sounds like, multiple times. Obviously, you lead the technology organization for JumpCloud. But tell me a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about who JumpCloud is.
Yeah, for sure. Alex, first of all, we finally have an excuse to hang out a little bit. So hopefully the people get to see us hanging out and benefit from it in some way. So I appreciate the opportunity. Yep, I'm JumpCloud's co-founder and CTO. I'll give you the 90-second, sort of thumbnail on me. Pretty boring. I'll come at it this way. The way my wife describes me is in my work endeavors is I've avoided all adult responsibility my entire career by building things, companies, and basically I've never sort of put a resume into a big company to go and join, a company. It's always been this crafting of these nascent ideas that evolve into things. And JumpCloud is a good example of that, working with Rajat Bhargava, my co-founder. So that's that. I really am a startup person at heart, but now, growing and scaling things into, these sort of phases of pre and post IPO kind of scale to the JumpCloud journey. And for the uninitiated of your podcast, JumpCloud is an access control platform. Gartner and others will have think of them as prototypical categories. And those categories are things like IAM and IDaaS, but it stretches in our definition to things like MFA and MD and other things. And let me explain why these things are important to us. When we really, Rajat and I poked at the thesis of what JumpCloud could be, this is, circa 2014, roughly 2013, 2014, the shingle is on the door, generally speaking. And we have this nascent set of code that's, we're seed funding. And really the thesis was this. We decided that the world was ready for an alternative to Microsoft's stalwart product called Active Directory. And we sort of had the head tilting, sort of poke at the idea of why does the world have to defer to this particular artifact for access control in companies that don't look a lot like a prototypical Microsoft company that you may have seen or been involved with in the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s, right? What those companies looked like was, clearly heterogeneic. Microsoft then and primarily now in the enterprise are the pole position. They run the enterprise and they run that through their sophisticated IT portfolio, a single stack of solutions that has the operating system, has the collaboration tooling, has the server infrastructure, and all the accoutrement products to run the business, from CRM to, all of the sort of workflow. And in the middle of it all is this thing called Active Directory that just hums away doing its job, giving people access to things. So that's a wonderful model. And Microsoft didn't develop that model. You saw that in the 60s, 70s, and 80s with even in the mainframe world, HP, Novell, products from that, those companies like X500, primitive directory services. This is not a new concept. But when you contrast that, the evolution of what Microsoft taught us in an on-premise sort of method in the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s, contrast that with, like, I'm sure, like what many of us in the modern world, cloud-born companies look like. I bet you right now, Alex, you're on a MacBook. Is that true?
Yeah, with 200 SaaS applications running for our 40-person company.
Absolutely. 200 SaaS apps. You still got some thingies on premise, like printers. You have a network, wireless access points. You're transient. You go in between offices and various locations like your home. You're building things in space, right? Probably Amazon or Google Cloud or maybe even Azure. But this is, when you look at the contrast, many of those things we just described are not created by Microsoft. So why would you necessarily have to buy Microsoft technologies in order to run your business in a modern way?
That makes sense.
That was cloud. I hope
no, it totally does. And so you saw this shift just in terms of like the shape and the way that companies looked and the technologies that they were adopting. And I think that message alone, I think, is like a message that I think most founders sort of have some sort of inspiration in terms of the spark and some sea wave or change that's happening in technology or the way that companies are doing something that creates an opportunity. The follow-on part of that then, and I think this is like the next thing that a startup has to get right or a founder has to get right, is what is the insertion point? Because there's kind of like step one, tie your shoes, is let me identify some trend that's going to disrupt something. And then usually when that disruption is happening, there's a million things that you could go do. How did you guys think about what the right insertion point was, or in that sea change? I mean, you just mentioned you got on-prem printers, you got MacBook, you got all these different things. Like you could, I'm sure, start in a million different places. Where did you guys start in the JumpCloud journey, and how did you decide on that?
So for anyone who may on this listening to this podcast when it is released, if you have any entrepreneurial sort of mojo and you want to try something on your own, to answer that question, Alex, I would state this: start grinding on your thesis of what you're building. Are you building a feature? Are you building a product? Or are you really going after a category? And we literally premeditatively thought about the latter. And trust me, some of that is a little bit of luck. A lot of it was, just a lot of scars and bruises that I wore, that Raj wore, because I'll tell you, I had some crash and burns by not having that filter or that thesis filter in my brain in prior endeavors. So put that in context. Now, to answer your question, what we needed to do was, number one, focus on, not necessarily building a widget. Here's what I mean by that. Or even some of these widgets are very large companies. In our space, which is access control or directories in the primitive sense, you had Microsoft, who, again, we've already asserted that this was the stalwart. It still remains to this day in the quote big enterprises, the number one, access control system. Major companies in the enterprise were born to service Active Directory. You look at incredible companies like privileged access management companies, right? They all think, well, we're going to sell into the enterprise, so there's going to be an AD there. Let's build our business, and it's always going to defer back to this Microsoft thing because that's the only thing that's ever going to be there. Companies like Okta and, I would say the single sign-on service market always was deferring towards a central source of credential, a directory, typically an AD or an LDAP, And again, big industries were born. Okta is a big business predicated on the enterprise and the likelihood of an Active Directory being in those environments. So now take that as additional context. When we built this company and this product, and knowing we wanted to build a category-changing thing, we had to focus on where the run rate was. Example, and that to us, just to satiate you, that was the mid-market. All right. Now, why? So if we, as a tiny little company born in a back office in Boulder, Colorado, right? If we had done the typical pathway, which was, I'm going to hire a bunch of sales guys, we're going to build this product, we're going to get some pipeline, and we're going to try and sell a foundational directory to big companies, it would have been a fool's errand. It would have been like, wait, what? Who are you guys? And you're asking me to swap out our most critical piece of infrastructure, the directory, and take a shot on you. That probably wouldn't have gone over very well. So we decided that companies that we were used to and we knew needed technology like this because of our own problems building startups that were growing into many thousands of employees. This is a market with massive TAM that was changing and evolving faster than the traditional enterprise. So the thesis was go get them early, and own what are now going to be the next generation of enterprise. So the proportion of unicorns that JumpCloud has in its portfolio, even post market correction, meaning everybody's taken a bit of a haircut, is outstanding. Cloud-born companies. So Alex, we really, really thought about not taking the normal approach. One other thing that I'll say before we slide into other things, we also chose a different style of go-to-market, which was, frankly, leveraging the product itself as the sales vehicle. Now, we have amazing salespeople, but to this day, we're roughly almost 10 years into selling this product. And the reality is we have done everything over the last 10 years, generating a very large business with very few salespeople, all through product-led growth. So the efficiencies we baked into the business to have people come and discover the brand itself, the product itself, get into it, trial it, and move into a purchasing flow is crazy. So that's just something that we had to do and did early on.
I have so many questions for you. Okay. So you saw the trend, you knew you wanted to build at the category level and not kind of at the feature, or even at the product level. And if you go to JumpCloud's website, that's obvious. You guys have lots of products. You're obviously clearly in the access control space broadly across a lot of different capabilities for the product. Did you ever, you knew that was where you wanted to go. You had this strategic imperative of let's go get these companies that are going to be the next set of unicorns. Did you ever question that? Did it ever not work, or were there hiccups, or did you see shiny objects alongside you in the journey? It's like, well, what if we just pivoted to do a little bit of that? How did you stay true to that journey? Was the path tortuous at some level? And how do you think about that? I mean, maybe this is not something you guys bumped into. I'm just really kind of curious.
No, let's be transparent.
Let's be honest. It happens.
in the journey of a startup, many people hear the word pivot. Oh no, things aren't working. We got to figure out something. Jig left, and let's go figure that out. The what problem? What we wanted to build, platform driven. We don't, we tend to try and not use the word product because we want to really focus on platform. That has never deviated. The acceptance of the what, whoa, JumpCloud, you're amazing. Where have you been? All right. So now if I could go back in time, maybe starting earlier on a vehicle to help push the brand in to market, as opposed to the pure 100% product-led growth model where you're waiting and, basically for people to discover your brand principally through paid programmatic or SEO, which is primarily our vehicle, amazingly. But you get addicted to that operational efficiency. Like when you see the numbers and the metrics and, it's as a founder and an operator, you get mystified, like, wow. And with precision, you have the proverbial dollar bill and you push that through the engine, you know exactly what you're going to get. But going, where we are today at 2023, again, a large business, both in both revenue and sort of, opportunity. There's that moment you get where, like in the analogy of a motorcycle, I think we've twisted the throttle as far as you can get on the model, right? A PLG. So you'll be watching us like sort of expand out new supplements to the PLG motion. We never want to deconstruct, and we don't have to like do anything inorganic to us or our business, which is to, oh my God, it's not working. Let's be enterprise sales. Let's just do that. Thankfully, we don't have to do that. But to go faster and own our time, compressing time, maybe a couple of years ago would have been cool to start to think through that a little bit. It's water under the bridge, still a great business. And we're doing all that stuff now. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Yeah. I mean, I think one thing you said that resonates with me, I want to say like Jeff Bezos said this, but I can't quite remember, is that you have to stay true to the mission, but flexible on the details. Someone smarter than me said that. That always resonates so much as a founder. Is like, we have a mission at Conductor One, for example, secure the workforce. Yeah. And we are very steadfast in that. The detail of the day-to-day and what you build next and how you kind of execute on that journey, that is a progression. And I think to your point, it's like you're always taking these signals from the business, from, if I put $1 into this part of it, does it go faster? Or do we need to expand the portfolio? There's a lot of decisions there. It's the 3-dimensional chess thing. But I think staying flexible to the details is something that resonates with me.
Yeah. Some things are immutable and frankly should stand the test of time. Like your mission statement, ours is not dissimilar in terms of what we ground ourselves on, the way our companies believe in their values. Every employee can chant our 3 values: building connections, 1% every day, and thinking big. Everyone.
I like it.
And the other side of this is, how our large meta theme is like, we make work happen. If JumpCloud isn't there, it can be a junk show. You have to stitch together things. And the promise of giving an employee secure, frictionless access to what they need from wherever they are, from a trusted device, just becomes extremely problematic and frankly, very risky, given today's security, very obvious security problems that other vendors are sort of, demonstrating.
I want to jump into that, but before we do, I have to ask you really quickly, can you tell everybody about 1% every day? Because I think that is, I love that concept and more people need to hear it and know it.
It's really a virtue that is pointed inward. I don't want to sound trite, like, squeeze more productivity out of your day by, getting more efficient with your ergonomics and your work setup. No, like we want our employees to really think about their lives differently. If you could tweak one better thing, get up maybe a half an hour earlier, give yourself something, get yourself 1% better every day. So you're thriving, not just surviving. And we feel that writ large, this, I'm certain, you have conversations with your peers like I do. And generally people are in the hurt box, and the 1% better every day. We want our employees to like have JumpCloud as maybe the one place that they can sink into, and work isn't fun every day, but it's the one place where they know they can talk to their peers and they are trusted and respected. There's no politics, and getting that 1% performance of just being in your body and showing up better, to your customers, to your coworkers. Like that's what we're really trying to inspire. Like when you hear Rajat or myself or, our executive leadership kind of work with their teams. That's what we're telling them.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's so powerful. It's like hyper tractable. The idea of improving something or like really just anything that you touch, like 1% every day is like, well, I can make something like 1% better. But the compounding impact of that is so massive over time. So like the analogy being like, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step or something like that. It's like you just make, small improvements every day. So switching a little bit back to the product, I don't know if this is a fiery hot take or not, but I'm curious if do you see JumpCloud as a security or an IT product, or is that not a meaningful distinction?
No, you sound like a fly on the wall of internal conversations. Here is my direct answer to that. Ultimately, what we do, it services, we are the platform for IT for our customers, put it that way. Ultimately, it is the foundation of security, but I would say, in the highest order or in the highest degree of like the way you look at JumpCloud, we are servicing the charter of IT people. So let me explain. Step back. Any IT organization on earth has one job to do. And this is not a belittlement because we all know they have billions of jobs to do. But they all lead into one specific thing, which is ensuring their employees, their workforce, who are the customers of IT, can get access to what they need to do their jobs securely. Think about it. Think about the number of tickets that an IT team receive on any given day. The vast majority of them are, I need. So what is that need? It is access. And then you can just follow the breadcrumb from there. So, we see massive companies like ServiceNow and others who we have a lot of respect for. Arguably, I think that when you really think about access control, that's the substrate. That is the mission of IT at its most pure essence.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, like obviously you guys are a product portfolio and there's a broad set of category. Like we'll talk about Gartner in a second here, but the category game, right? And all the acronyms and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But one of those acronyms obviously is MFA. And it's interesting because if you talk to 10 people and you ask them, is multi-factor authentication a security product or an IT product, you might probably get like very different answers actually.
Yeah.
And I've just been fascinated with this trend of those two functions. I think particularly for cloud forward companies feels so intertwined now. Because the other part of it is like, do you see your security team as a detection and response team, or do you see it as a proactively keep the organization secure function? If it is proactively keep the organization secure, IT is a critical part of that, right? Making sure people get, to your point, the right access at the right time. You guys do a lot around zero trust access and conditional access, multi-factor authentication. So I think even that blend is interesting. Do you see changes in cloud forward companies and the companies you work with, even just organizationally around the structure of IT and security? Is that something interesting at all that you're looking at?
Absolutely. So the two categories you talked about security are not mutually exclusive. We have thousands of customers and I speak to many of them on any given day, and they are absolutely starting to meld those concepts. The division of security and IT is an artifact of yore. And frankly, even from the enterprise and the segmentation between, think about it. IT were the ones buying and purchasing and implementing tooling, some of which was directory, some of which was the actual resource, like an application, all of those things, right? And what did security do in the primitive days? By that, I mean the 90s and 2000s. They had to observe and attest that things were generally, run securely. Now, those worlds of doing and attesting are now converging in many, many ways. Both, the tooling. I think your MFA point is an interesting one. MFA is a tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is acquired almost universally by IT at the bequest of a security team who are on the hook for ISO and SOC and other forms of attestation, right? So Yeah, it's just, you're going to see, a movement. By the way, in modern companies, especially companies who are building product, SaaS product, right, in space, like up in Amazon or Google Cloud or whatever, you see, and this is not a new trend, but you see in many cases, not all cases, but even a higher degree of security posture from the engineering level, because that culture driven through DevOps and now what we call DevSecOps is really driving the culture of observability, of data-driven analysis. And you're watching teams really, they look a lot different than what they like security teams of yore, who had a lot of people who weren't practicing engineers, right? You had
Right.
compliance-driven folks, important people, don't get me wrong, but there was not a deep appreciation for the code level analysis that, of course, companies like ours require and how our security operations team operates. It's a way different look.
Yeah, I think that shift is super interesting as well. The security focus around engineering and automation it feels to me like very new in the last 5 years. And
Yeah.
I think it to your point also, I see a lot of security teams moving from like the testing and the detection piece of it to now, hey, we're like operationally responsible for some of these concerns, because when you look at those concerns, it's like, well, we can be like reactive to them and we can detect things and file JIRAs and stuff like that, or we can actually be enablers and tool builders and help people get the right answer that they need and help prevent these issues from happening in the first place. But
Yep.
it really requires a lot more kind of integration with that, with the IT team and the IT stack. One thing that's kind of interesting that we're also seeing a lot of, and I'm just curious to get your take on this top level, is there's platforms for identity and access management. And I think one trend we've seen in the market is there are also platforms for like consumer identity and workplace identity. I think if you ask me what my opinion is on that, I'll give you a very hot take. A lot of people might not like it. You can argue about whether or not those should be one or the same platform. I think within the workforce, though, it still feels like there's separate concerns sometimes between how like engineers manage access and want to control access to things like AWS versus how you would maybe manage access to productivity applications like Loom or something like that, where, it helps you do your job, but it's not managing your infrastructure. It's not in scope for your SOC 2. Do you believe that those ultimately belong in a singular platform? Or I've heard some people really espouse kind of like the siloification of access management across some of these different teams. And I'm just curious to
Yeah.
get your take on that.
It's an interesting one. We have thought about it. I'll come at answering that this way. Like, we have absolutely chosen our path, which is workforce oriented access control. My knee jerk response is I don't necessarily see the need for a conversion. And there's some substance to that. One is consumer IAM is tuned for engineering who are building artifacts into their service or application, and basically so they don't have to build it themselves. That's done. This is a problem space that has been solved for through SDKs and all the things you see Auth0 do, and secure auth, and a number of these. There's like a whole sea of these kinds of developer oriented companies that build access control for social login and other things, right? It's just a different animal than how workforce oriented access and entitlements and those controls come in. At their architectural cores, they absolutely share the same DNA. But when they are instantiated, the tooling and the use cases are absolutely different, right? And certainly how you get to market are totally different. They're not the same buyer. They're not the same, budget or purchasing cycles. It's just different. So I don't think there's any need personally to organically say these should be one, and henceforth we will have a common platform. It doesn't necessarily need to be that way.
For what it's worth, I agree. I put my opinion out there, but I'm 100% aligned on that. What about internally in the workforce, though? Do you believe that like engineers should be using different access management tools for, let's say, like infrastructure versus productivity applications and kind of this sounds really pejorative, but like the unwashed masses of your workforce that, or maybe just need productivity tools, like, or is that a singular
Yeah,
control plane, like JumpCloud should be used for it all?
that I have probably a bit more aggressive stance on. I think it should be unified. I think the moment you start to fracture and you start to lose the plot from an attestation standpoint, it becomes much more complicated to provide total control and security for a workforce. Yeah, there in our company, our IT team, and this is very meta because JumpCloud runs JumpCloud, obviously, and JumpCloud is built in space, as you would imagine, a massive global, cloud-based platform. Our IT team are the ones who are doing the provisioning, all automated into JumpCloud's in many ways into JumpCloud's APIs that then, basically ensure the right level of role and entitlement into those nooks and crannies of, in our case, Amazon. So yes, there are plenty of ways to enable a DevOps team to do CI/CD and other kinds of, think of it as entry into their platform, but they're also going to be on the hook for attestation. So the moment you start to bifurcate and you have differing, kinds of pools of things, it just gets much, much more complicated. Now, the last thing that I'll say is, the vehicles and the mechanics of, taking a worker and packaging up their entitlements and handing over tokens, for example, into Google Workspace or Loom, as you mentioned, or any of the billions of SaaS applications, is going to be different than the payload of entitlements and then the different authentication vehicles to get in, be that SSH or other things, right? So I can appreciate, we cover both of those worlds, but what I'm not saying is one size fits all, right? You have to be able to actually credibly do what you need to do to securely gain access or give an employee access to those widely disparate types of resources.
Yep, that resonates with me a lot. I see there's so much benefit also to having that in a single system. It's the challenges, at least that I've observed previously, have been making sure you have the right controls and concerns for the different parties and constituents. It's where you get into trouble is where you've got like a singular policy or something like that, where you don't have the right flexibility to apply it to different resource types and infrastructure and applications. Because the reality is, AWS is different in many ways, from a compliance perspective, security perspective, and so forth. It kind of a funky non sequitur, but I'm really kind of curious. So you're steeped in technology, you're a technology guy. AI and LLMs. I mean, I think when ChatGPT launched this last year, it like shook, everyone was immediately looking at it and figuring out, what is this technology? What does it do? What does it do well? And does it have a place in my business? Like, should I be doing something else? I'm assuming JumpCloud was no different, and you guys probably took a look at it. Can you talk about how do you see AI and LLMs playing a role potentially in identity and access management?
Yeah. So there's sort of like a two sides of this AI coin. One is absolutely internally, we are using AI for workforce productivity, right?
Yeah.
So just think of doing jobs better that in no way threaten any of the information about or to or regarding our customers. It's all just, making sales and SDRs and other people like kind of move faster. In some cases, engineering move faster. To your other point, the other side of this coin is, what can AI do to force multiply our product and service for our customers? And that's really interesting. And the short answer is, yep, we are deeply, invested in analyzing trust me, the broad set of offerings that, can help us move faster through large language models, machine learning, and natural language processing. So remember, AI has been around a while. right?
Yeah.
And we're all ginned up on super funky pictures you can create on ChatGPT. That's whatever, you know what I mean? Cool. In our world, number one, we're super interested in ensuring our datas are our datas, and that we're
Mhm.
allowing a propagation of any of our data into public pools, commingled pools, to teach other public models to do better. We're more interested in our own snapshots. I think bringing that in. I think Amazon and Google Cloud are excellent at this, and the assurance that your data is your data. So we have high confidence in that regard. The platform right now is spilling off obscene amounts of data. By that, I mean, just think about JumpCloud is Grand Central Station across thousands and thousands of customers. So what that means is the Grand Central Station of access control. Users come in, they get access to things, they do things in the thing. They were there for a certain period of time. They were on this network or on this laptop or on, think of all of those elements that JumpCloud has this really wonderful 360-degree view of: SaaS applications, networks, machines, all that, right? Which is a very unique place that JumpCloud has that other folks don't. So learning that data, influencing it in large language models, and providing that as more a force multiplying service back to our customers in ways that I'm going to keep a little bit close to the vest right now are
Yeah.
absolutely things that are. We have a fairly sophisticated team of what I call Navy SEALs in our engineering group. They're called JumpCloud Labs, and they, as the leader of that team, says we get to chase butterflies and do cool shit all day, building the next generation of like platform artifacts, and AI is a big part of that journey.
I love it. That's cool. I wasn't sure if I was going to get you to be able to spill the beans on some pre-launch stuff, but it's cool. It's not surprising that you guys are taking a look at it. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I feel like we're still just scratching the surface right now as an industry around how these new technologies can be used. But I think there's going to be a lot of transformative things done with them. I think there's going to be a lot of like not really useful stuff done, but there will be some really transformative applications of AI and LLM into probably like every single technology category at some level. It's just a question of like, what's the use case, right?
Oh, for sure. It's here to stay. It's like on par with, some would say the internet itself, just having
Yeah.
that force multiplier of the way things happen now on Earth. This will be the next greatest influence of the next 50 years,
Yep. 100%. Kind of on this broader thread of security teams. I mean, you mentioned you talk to customers all the time. JumpCloud's got a massive business, thousands and thousands of customers. Are you hearing like what are the themes that you're hearing from companies? Like where are IT and security teams struggling today, and or where you see things going, like what the next set of challenges look like?
Yeah. I think the answer is yes, very broadly. Like, let me talk two sides, one very tactical, one very kind of strategic. The very tactical side of things is please fix tokens and, and static credentials. And, I think JumpCloud has done a pretty effective job as of late with the release of a product called JumpCloud Go. It's a new way of just thinking about a token that isn't a bearer token, if you're familiar with these concepts, and can only be used on the device it is issued to. So, in a very tactical sense, the in vogue attack vector of the bad guys now is go and use phishing campaigns, spear phishing to be exact, get onto a quote privileged device, which is typically an engineer's device, go grab those tokens, which have kind of session lifespans that are obscenely long. And some of the biggest vendors you've seen on Earth have extremely long session lengths. They can scoop those things off and replay them. They're good to go if the bad guys can exfiltrate them off machines, and now they have the entitlements and token to get into whatever Amazon or into a support services of, a specific, vendor, all those things. So we got to stop that dead. And given the fact that we have a crazy amount of IP on devices with our agent, we're wetting that token with the fingerprint that we use on the secure enclaves of devices. So you can't use it unless you're on the right trusted device. So tactically, we hear that in spades because that is a very acute problem that security teams face, and what CrowdStrike and SentinelOne are put on devices to sort of generally look for, but we're the remediator of it, put it that way, which the other, security EDRs aren't. So that's like the tactical side. On the more meta / please help us looking forward kind of vein, it's more proactivity, more signals, more ways to, I guess, to sum it up, to alert or, get more sophisticated for IT and SecOps teams that something is amiss, right? And part of that is, I think of it less like, EDR. Like, I think we're huge CrowdStrike fans. We're customers. CrowdStrike's an investor in JumpCloud. So to be, full disclosure, they built an amazing business. But in our case, I would rather be much, much more proactive, because we are the party that provides the access, gives the tokens. We know the entitlements, continually evaluating that access pattern is definitely something, our customer base is looking at JumpCloud for, right? And we're really excited, for some of those kinds of moves in the future.
I'm excited about that future. That's an awesome future. I've worked on a lot of authentication products and device-aware access. And
Yep.
I guess two quick comments. One is, I love that everyone is solving the token binding problem, or not everyone, at least that you guys have. That's great. I think it's one of these things where it's always whack-a-mole with attackers, right? And if you solve MFA, it's just, well, what's the next path of least resistance that I can go attack? And it's like, well, session tokens, obviously, they're like cash. You can grab them from a device and they're good at the door. And I think people are waking up to that and they're realizing that. And so I think it's phenomenal that you guys are solving for that. And then I guess the second part of it is the world where people get access that they need when they need it, and they're not getting it for longer than they should have it. And that's contextual and it's real time. That is a really cool world. So I'm super excited about what you guys are building for. And maybe on that note, it's a good opportunity to wrap up the podcast. So I think we're getting to time, but yeah, excited for what you guys are building. And that's a really great, sort of vision of the future. And thanks for being on the podcast.
This was great, man. I appreciate you, and thanks for having us on. And thanks for, I know you'll pass this on to your engineering team, the great work that they did to integrate our products together. Super excited for that. We share a bunch of common customers, so we'll make them happy, make them more productive, make them more secure.
Absolutely. I love it. Looking forward to working with you guys closer. Thanks, Craig.
You too. Later, Alex.
See ya. Thanks for tuning in. This episode of All Aboard is brought to you by the team at Conductor One. We'd love to hear your feedback. Send us a message at allaboard@conductorone.com. Until next time.